Awesome. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome. Good to see you back if you're coming back again. And if you didn't come to part one, that's okay. Part two is we'll do a recap, so don't worry. And talking about school counselors as being leaders within a multi-tiered, multi-domain system of support, which yes, is a mouthful, but we will talk about why we added that extra piece. So in case you haven't gotten to present or to come to my other presentations, a little bit about me. I have a background in the field of school counseling, have been a school counselor, a counseling grant project director. I've taught in the school counseling programs at a couple different universities before. Just love the field of school counseling. Was previously the president of the California Association of School Counselors, so really love the profession, and have co-authored a couple books about school counseling, and also have graduated recently from the Harvard Graduate School of Education's Education Doctorate program. And so, and I will just share during my my time in finishing that program is that I worked in a district in the Austin, Texas area. So that's where I'm located currently, and worked to help increase racial equity in advanced coursework. And that's, as we know, especially at the secondary level for school counselors, that's a really important piece as we think about equity in our roles as well. So super excited to be here and talk with you about all things school counseling. So let's get started. All right, our objectives for this presentation is by the end of our presentation, hope that we can learn to be leaders within our schools and districts as we implement comprehensive services within MTMDSS. Again, I'll share about that with you in case you didn't come to any other session. We'll be able to either further evaluate if you already did in part one, or begin to evaluate our counseling program within MTMDSS for areas of strength and growth. And then I'm going to share a bunch of examples, which I remember as a school counselor were always really helpful for me to start to think how I could connect my work to those types of examples and really think about how these examples could help support us and, really be models potentially as we're thinking about multi-tiered systems of support implementation. So I wanted to start with this, is asking who is in the room. So the role you have, if you're a school counselor, if you're a school leader, a district leader, school psych, just what your role, and then also I was trying to gauge again who's here and who's been in another presentation, just so I can make sure I tailor things appropriately. So if you just take a minute to write your role, and if you've attended a previous session that I presented one yesterday and then one today, I just want to get a gauge of how much review to do or not. I'll put on some music in the background briefly. All right, so Diana, I don't know if anyone's been putting anything in the chat, but wanted to check in and see.
We do have. We've got Jacqueline, who is a new school counselor for the high school level, and she attended a session today. Cami was in the session this morning, and she's a high school counselor, or a school counselor in a high school. And then Amanda, who is a former school counselor turned consultant, still in the school counseling realm.
Perfect. Okay, and then I see Leslie, thanks for joining too. And so some of us have been here. And here's the thing, I always think even with review, even when I have heard it before, sometimes hearing it double really makes it stick in. So I'll do a little bit of review to make sure we're all on the same page in case people are new, but not for too long. So the idea of a multi-tiered, multi-domain system of school counseling for school counselors comes from this idea of multi-tiered systems of support, that MTSS is probably something many of us are familiar with, right? And it's this idea of thinking about a tiered model of prevention and intervention for academics and for social, emotional, behavioral. The thing that's missing for us as school counselors, when we know our role also includes college and career. And so Dr. Trish Hatch coined the idea of a multi-tiered, multi-domain system of supports, MTMDSS, because we need more acronyms in education. Just kidding. But really, but because this idea of understanding that if we don't put the college and career, there really are important components that aren't just tier 1 for college and career, but that are tier 2 and tier 3 as well. So thinking about that when we're understanding our role and how the delivery of our role looks. And so we are there's a couple of videos, and I shared this one this morning, which I highly, highly recommend. If you on the in the presentation PDFs, hopefully the links should be there. But if you go to Hatching Results/videos, you can find the videos. So I shared this one, which is awesome. But I wanted to share a different one with you today, or I guess this afternoon, that also shares a little bit about what a tiered model looks like and how this looks for students. And so let me just get this popped up. All right, thanks for waiting. Okay.
Each day our kiddos arrive ready to learn, and they're super excited to get all of the Tier 1 activities and curriculum that schools provide for them every day. And for most kids, this is very effective. And so we're going to call this the green tier, Tier 1. Now, sometimes students struggle with attendance or citizenship or behavior, and they qualify then through the door of data for an intervention at a Tier 2 level. And if that's effective, they may go back to Tier 1. If it's not effective, they may then enter into a Tier 3 intervention qualification, where they are provided a more intensive intervention opportunity. The goal, again, is to ensure that the students aren't labeled as a Tier 3 student or a Tier 2 student, but instead are receiving those services. And as the student improves, they return down to the second tier and hopefully back into the first tier, with the goal of all students being in Tier 1.
Perfect. So this video is a great example of what it looks like when we're thinking about multi-tiered, multi-domain systems of support, and the idea of how this looks for delivery and for what students receive. And this, just like Trish said, that let me go back. When we're thinking about this model, is that we use data to better understand which students would need specific services. And again, students aren't a Tier 2 student. It's that they maybe need Tier 2 services or Tier 3 services, and they aren't always in that tiers. As soon as they are, if they were in Tier 2 for multiple Ds and Fs, for example, as soon as they don't have multiple Ds and Fs, they then are receiving the core curriculum and Tier 1 services that all kids receive, and are not then needing additional support. So I like this idea of the doors, which are the data components that open the door for the student to go in, and that students will pop out once they are back to not needing those services. So both of these videos are available on the Hatching Results website, and really helpful as you're trying to explain your role to other people, and the way you're delivering services to students. And so I did want to start with this too, is when we're thinking about delivery of services and a multi-tiered system of support. And we also know, Indiana, that our ratios for school counselor to student are close to 500 to 1. So we know that that's an average, right? There might be some of you who have fewer and maybe closer to the recommended 250 to 1 ratio. And there may be some of you that unfortunately have even higher. And what I'll say too is that because of the recent pandemic, really still recent, it's still going on, obviously, but that really impacted us educationally, and that it really might have turned our pyramid upside down. And what I mean by that is that we might have been spending a lot of time in this idea of, we know there's a lot of kids who had multiple Fs or failing classes that were not on track to graduate, a lot of kids not signing on to their classes. I will say the last year and a half was probably really bonkers. Well, I know it was really bonkers for everybody, especially for counselors when we're pulled in all these different directions and trying to support kids. And so what I wanted us to do is just take a deep breath and take one more deep breath and stop and reflect and think about what your ideal program you would want it to be when you're thinking about how to basically flip your pyramid back over. And I will say a silver lining that might have come out of COVID is that as you're then thinking about the fall, in a few months, thinking about designing your program, thinking about, okay, how can I kind of restart? There might be some tools and things that have actually helped. Like I know a lot of counselors have updated their websites quite a bit, which has been really good. People have thought about ways to incorporate families into more meetings with kids via Zoom, and so there can be really some good positives with that. And so thinking about where could we start as you are thinking about the fall, what might help you think about flipping this pyramid back over when you are thinking of starting your program again in a couple months. So I'll give you a minute to pause for the chat, and I'll put some music on in the background for a minute. Okay, give me a few more seconds. All right, Diana, any comments in the chat?
Nothing in the chat. No.
Nothing in the chat. Y'all are thinking. Okay, that's all right. So as you all are thinking about what you might be doing if your flame work has been a little bit flipped upside down, which honestly I think probably everyone's was flipped quite a bit upside down and all around this past year. What I will say is I think it's, like I said, I think it can be a really good time to reflect on what your program, what your ideal program would be, because as you're starting kind of fresh this fall, in a way, it's like you can start brand new and start to think about putting new practices and new work into place. And so what I wanted to start with actually was tell you a little bit about when so I'd worked as a counselor at all levels, and my most recent position was a middle school level. And when I started at the middle school level a few years ago, which I guess I started in 2012, which seems like a long time ago. But anyhow, when I started, I was the one school counselor full time. And there was 900 7th and 8th graders. So as you can see, there was another counselor who came a couple days a week, which was helpful, but if you're the one who's there every day, a lot falls on you as the school counselor. I did have a counseling clerk that was really helpful, who was able to, she was the one who helped with classroom, not with classroom, with when students came into the counseling office, she would help kind of manage what was going on, and made sure that kids could get and families could get appointments and such. And then we did have an intern that helped a little bit too, but really a lot of that was on me in terms of creating my program. And so what I could have very easily have done was just allowed the office to be a revolving door of chaos, right? Not on purpose, but because that is what happens, counselors, right? That teachers refer kids. There's maybe an incident at lunch that kids come to school late and they get sent to you. That could have happened, especially with, we were at a really high need school. Let's say about 60% of our students were free and reduced, and a lot of students who were English was their second language, and just a variety of other needs that were going on too. And so what I did was that I actually really thoughtfully tried to put together a counseling program that still followed the ASCA model and a tiered model of prevention and intervention, because I knew what could happen again is if I didn't, it would just be chaos. And I talked with my principal, who had never heard about the ASCA model. He'd never heard about, a tiered model of prevention and intervention, and explained to him what I was doing along the way, and explained also, like, if we had another school counselor full time, here's what we could be doing, and we could be doing more, and presented some needs. And so what I'm going to do is actually share going to share this presentation with you. And what I'm going to have you pretend like is pretend that you are actually my superintendent, because my principal and I presented this to the superintendent to advocate for another school counselor. Okay, so just think about this as I am sharing. What are you learning about the program? And this really, I'm sharing this with you because when we think about counselors as being leaders within a multi-tiered, multi-domain system of support, sharing your data and sharing about the work you're doing is really, really huge in advocating for your students and for your role. Okay, so I said, hi, Dr. Singh. Thank you so much for meeting with me. I'm really excited to talk with you about the counseling program that we are developing at Potter Junior High School. In collaboration, you can see the awesome counseling team members we have that are here a variety of days a week. And so I wanted to start with our mission is that our counseling department is committed to advocating for every student's success and achievement in academic, college career, and social emotional development. We follow the American School Counselor Association national model, which is a framework for helping us design and deliver our program. And so there's the foundation of the program that includes standards for students, standards for us as school counselors. Then you can see these arrows go into the delivery system, which is what we're providing to students in terms of class lessons, intentional interventions for kids, but I'll talk more about that. And then the management system is how we coordinate it all in terms of calendars and action plans and such. And then you can see these sneaky little arrows that go up into the accountability, where we want to think about how students are different as a result of our comprehensive counseling program. And this really, then this data helps us go back down to think, are there changes we need to make in our foundation? So you can see this is really a continual improvement model. And as a side note, this model has been updated since this presentation, but I just kept it as original. So, and then again, Superintendent Singh, the areas that we focus on for students, for school counselors are academic, career, and social emotional. So one of the things I did as I started as the school counselor at Potter this year is I wanted to look at the needs that were going on for our students. And so I looked at some of our school climate data. And what we did was I compared this data in gray. This is from last year's results. And then we also re-surveyed students this fall to see how they were feeling this year. And so what you can see is that we've seen some positives in students agreeing and strongly agreeing that they feel close to people at school, that they're feeling happy at school. This also that we asked this specifically about students saying if they have a teacher or an adult who tells them they do a good job. You can see there's close to 70% say pretty much true or very much true, and a teacher or an adult who believes they'll be a success. And we also asked and wanted to find out about bullying, and so really wanting to ask about how many times students have been bullied or harassed. So about 72% said 0, meaning about 30% have been bullied at least once. And what you can see is that some of the reasons that pop up, any other reason was means that because this is 74% is 0 times, it means there's any other reason was the highest for kids having received bullying. Not as many, thankfully, for mental or physical disabilities and in other areas, but knowing that means there's about 30% of kids who are getting bullied, and that's something that we're really wanting to think about and focus on this year. In terms of being pushed, slapped, and hit, the 0 times and the rumors, meaning about 40% of kids have been pushed, slapped, or hit that they responded to, and then also had rumors spread about them. So these are areas that we're also focusing on and really thinking how we can create a campus that's both emotionally safe but also physically safe for kids. And the survey also asks kids about carrying a weapon. And so this was a little bit concerning, but helpful for us to know, for us to think about, what can we do to make sure our students are safe, and how we see that about 25% said they have seen someone carrying a weapon. So how can we help kids develop really healthy relationships with the staff, so that if they do see this, that they can report it and they feel comfortable in doing that. And we also asked if kids are harassed or bullied, where this is happening and when. And what you'll notice is that it's happening most, of course, in class makes a lot of sense because that's where kids are a lot, but also in the quad and during PE are times, so we can watch out for that. And then during our breaks and lunch and before school. So this is just helpful for us to be really aware of what's going on. And then about 60% said they agree or strongly agree they're feeling safe, compared to only 48% the prior spring. And as a side note, outside of presenting, what I'll say is some of this data we were presenting, if I was the superintendent, I might be slightly concerned that it's not higher. And part of us showing it was to show that there was improvement, but also that there was still a high need when we were thinking about advocating for another school counselor. Because again, 60%, it's not super high. That still means 40% aren't feeling that way. Okay, so what we're doing for the counseling program is we are thinking about a model of prevention and intervention. And so we are doing school-wide curriculum from the counseling department where we have prevention lessons and activities and a visible presence on campus in the classrooms and during break times. We also have intentional interventions where we're using data to identify, address, and monitor students who have additional needs. And that also includes connecting and coordinating with families and teachers. And then we know some students maybe need even more, where we're helping support students via SSTs, supporting through potentially 504s as needed, and again, as IEPs as needed too, and referring kids to outside resources for that. And so the plan we have created for our classroom lessons this year is that we have created a plan for, we've actually already gone into the PE classes this fall. We worked with our administration and went in and did a presentation about student expectations, resources. Then we're going to do a Red Ribbon Week presentation that will happen in October about being drug-free and making healthy choices. We actually added this one in, a self-injurious behavior presentation. This happened because we are recognizing there's a lot of students that are participating in self-injurious behavior, like cutting their arms and such. And so we added this presentation in because there was a need, and we're working with the Cal State San Marcos nursing students. We're going to do an anti-bullying and respect lesson in December, and using the Safe School Ambassador program I'll tell you more about. Then we'll do college and career readiness in January, including a career day. Positive decision making, and then we'll do transition to middle school and high school. And so this is the activities that are, when you think about this pyramid again, is that this is for all of our kids, that everyone is receiving this. One of the things that we're really excited about is we are going to participate in the Safe School Ambassadors program, which is research-based, and it equips students to help reduce bullying and other forms of mistreatment by training student leaders, not just the traditional ASB leaders, but other leaders, to support students in intervening when they're noticing this. And so we're identifying leaders right now, and they're going to be participating in a 2-day training and have ongoing support. And then this will align with us monitoring the the survey that we just shared with you, the climate survey, and then also discipline records. So in terms of intentional interventions, we know this is a lot for a PowerPoint slide, but what we'll share is that we're really thinking about students with a high number of behavior referrals, students with 3 or more Fs on report cards, students who are returning to school after suspension, and also students who end up having a student attendance review board contract. So we won't go through all of this, but we want to share with you that these are the specific plans we have for kids in terms of what we're going to be doing, and these are our areas of focus, what we're wanting kids to believe, know, and be able to do, and then how we're going to monitor this data. And then we know that there's individual referrals as well, where whether it's in terms of academics or behavior, we help coordinate services for kids, and then also provide crisis intervention and counseling as needed too. And what ASCA, the second edition, recommends in terms of classroom curriculum is right here. And what I did, because, I'm the one counselor for 900 kids, and I'm really grateful to have Miss Thompson come a couple of days a week too. But, with having kind of limited services, what the American School Counselor recommends for curriculum is about this timing is right here. And then I put approximately what I am actually able to do, what our counseling program is able to do right here. And what you'll notice is this responsive services is really, really high right now, because we have high needs. And what I did to help you better understand that, and also for myself and our administrators to better understand it, in the last 25 days of school, I tracked how many suicide assessments we had, which was 7. It's 60, actually more than 60 bullying and harassment meetings, 5 reports to Child Protective Services, and 8 post-suspension expulsion meetings. And so because of the high ratio, it's really been difficult to implement as much of the prevention as possible, and really hoping that, if we had more support, we would be able to do that. And so our vision would be supporting 2 full-time counselors, so we could proactively address and support student needs, providing and developing more partnerships to support our services, and then also recruiting school counseling interns to help as well. And we do know that there's an opportunity to apply for a grant for us for more counselors. And I will say, I forgot I had shared this, that I was appointed as the middle school vice president for the California Association of School Counselors. And I'm also going to be presenting at a couple conferences. And I just share this as knowing that, we are excited to share this with the district, that, there's good work going on in Fallbrook. And so I just thank you so much for your support. And we're really grateful to partner with you and have your support as the superintendent. Thank you so much for making time for us today. Okay, so I'm going to pause and stop my share and then reshare. But while I'm refreshing and getting the right PowerPoint up, I want you all to think for a minute. If you were the superintendent, what did you learn about my program, the counseling program, from that presentation? And again, and how does this connect with leadership? What did you learn? How does this connect to leadership for school counselors? Oops. What do you all think? Give you a minute in the chat.
Amanda has said you're using data to drive your services.
Yep, absolutely. Data to drive the services. I'll share too, as you're thinking, is that wanted the superintendent to know, in addition to data, that there's a model like that we're using in terms of the American School Counselor Association. A lot of administrators don't know that we have that model, and so they might just think we're kind of like, I don't think they think we're making it up, but they might just not know that information. And so to share, there's a framework, we have standards that we support for students. Anything else, Deanna?
Trying to spend more time on proactive services for more students.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the slide that I was really encouraged to create from my administrators was actually that slide where I shared about how reactive things had been, and to help kind of almost share additional need, and that I was trying to be preventative, but this is what was preventing me from being preventative, because it wasn't just like tier 2 needs. Those are real high tier 3 needs, and that were, immediate crisis response needed. And so we really would be in this continual cycle of not being able to be as preventative if we, we continue to function that way. And so I will say I know it doesn't always happen this easily, but we were really lucky, and we were able to hire another school counselor that following year. And so, and then really were able to do more preventative. And while we still did have high needs, we were able to balance it a little bit better because there were 2 of us. Yeah, anything else, Diana?
Nothing else right now, no.
Okay, perfect. So I wanted to share this idea of being leaders. And I will say, for us as school counselors, I think that we often I'm not sure about you, but I used to feel a little bit nervous about sharing about what I was doing. And we get into this work because we love kids, we want to help kids, and kind of this instead, when we're thinking about having to share with our school staff or with our superintendent, it might make us feel really nervous. That being said, I think of it more as not advocating for me, but advocating for my student needs. And that helps me feel more comfortable when I'm thinking about presenting information, because it's, again, not about me, it's about the students, and the students can get what's best if I'm able to share with them. And so in the last session, we were able to dig into this a little more. And so if you haven't gotten it, it's either connected on the app, or that it's also here as a bit.ly. And we won't go through it in as detailed amount for you all to, last time we gave some time to fill it in. But I want to give it as a resource because I think it's really, really helpful to consider your counseling program. And it has this, again, blank planning worksheet that you can fill in that is really, really useful. I will say, when we're thinking about a multi-tiered, multi-domain system of support, one thing to think about is how we are aligned with other professionals, other school counselors, and also how are we aligned with ourselves within our building, and then also within our district. I gave the McDonald's example, so I'll give you another example. I think that, so Dr. Trish Hatch coined, I mean, the term franchising is not new, but this idea of franchising school counseling is something she has talked a lot about. And I used to work with Hatching Results full time and travel all over. And she would joke with me, I started to really like going to the Hampton Inn. And this is not a commercial for them. This is more just what was really helpful to me is I knew what I could count on. I knew that, like, kind of the layout of the way they were set up. I knew that they always had hot tea when I got there. I knew there was like kind of a reliable dependency that I could count on, right? And so when we think about our counseling programs, do people know either at our school site and our district what they can count on from school counselors? And so the quick McDonald's example is this: when you think about McDonald's, it's a franchise, but they also accommodate for local needs. So you go to Hawaii, there might put a pineapple on your burger. There's a McEuro in Greece. And so it's not to say you have to be cookie cutter exactly. So it is responding to specific needs, but really at the same time thinking about how can you have consistency so people know what to count on from your counseling program. And so when you're thinking about tier 1, there's the curriculum, there's the individual student planning, and then there's the school-wide school-wide activities that happen. And a couple examples, I want to share this one. This is actually from a district up in Northern California, Northern, it's called Shasta. This example is amazing. Basically, the whole county decided to work together and franchise. And so they, in the county, it's a pretty rural area. And I know Indiana, you all know rural. It's fairly rural. And so what they found, and pretty low income too. And what they found is that a lot of kids will potentially move, not just schools, but move to different district schools. So in different districts within this county, depending on what's going on for their families. So what they did as a county team is they created an action plan for their classroom lessons and decided and really worked as a team. What do we believe as a team that all 9th graders should get, that all 10th graders should get, regardless of their school? So for example, a high school 101 lesson was one of the things they thought was really important for their 9th grade students. A 4-year plan lesson was really helpful. And what they did is they collaboratively worked together to fill out this action plan and in content. So you can see there's the slide deck, there's the lesson plan, they have a little activity here, a crossword puzzle, the 4-year plan document. And I share this because it's really, really neat when you think about, we know that creating lessons can take a lot of work. And so instead of just working, everyone creating their own freshman 101 slide deck, is that they split them up and they created the lessons. And so you'd make a copy and, just maybe change to have some of the more specific information for your school, maybe change your school colors. They created pre-post assessments and then also thought through some of the data components too. For individual student planning, when we think about the what students need in terms of having 4 and 6 year plans for graduation and then their post-secondary readiness, when you think about this, this is a little tool that you can use. And again, this PowerPoint is connected to the conference app, that you're thinking about each grade level. Okay, well, what tool might you use? Because some districts have a district developed 4-year plan. Some maybe you use Zello or Naviance. Maybe there's an electronic paper or a paper copy. Like, let's be clear what's happening at each grade level. I'll say my previous district, we started doing a electronic version, and so we wanted to be really clear because our district was a K through 8, and then our kids went to the high school. So we wanted to make sure the electronic version got to the high school, right? So when will you do these plans? How will you do it? Will it be a classroom lesson? Will you have individual meetings? Will it be maybe both? What content will you cover? Because you know what the content you're going to cover for a 6th grader is really different than for a 10th grader. And that's okay, but being clear so that you're making sure you know what each student is getting. And how will you get family input? Is there a school-wide activity? And what outcome is it related to? So for example, graduation rates, scholarships, and such. So thinking through these components when you're considering how to deliver individual student planning is an important piece. And then the parent and family education component that we didn't talk about as much last time is, how can we best support our families in this work? And here are a couple examples of work from previous schools that I've been part of, where we had a parent academy at my last elementary school. And by the way, I'm so sorry, my cat is driving me crazy. Hold on. Sorry about that. She is scratching at my door. I try to close the door to have a peaceful presentation, and then of course this is what happens. So anyhow, you can see the different types of offerings we had for our families, and we listed this and gave it to them at the beginning of the year based on what potential needs they might have and how we could connect this to what was going on for students too. And what I'll say is that at the elementary level, something that was really, really helpful for us is we started actually also doing a student activity, an event the same night. So for example, with our financial planning workshop, we had a parent specific workshop, but we also had a workshop for our kids where we talked about some basic finance stuff, like age appropriate. And then we made piggy banks. And that really helped us get a lot more families there because the kids were driving their families to want to come. And then you can see we also were really intentional about translating the presentations into Spanish, because we knew a lot of our families spoke Spanish as well. And so what you might think about too, as you're thinking about family education for Tier 1, is how can you, kind of think through what are the contents that you'd want district-wide to be happening. Like, what do you believe is important for all 6th through 8th grade families to know, for all 12th grade families, so that it's not just, one school does a financial aid night, but another school doesn't. No, instead really thinking about how that might look and what are some agreements that you think would be important for all families. So I'll pause before we go on to Tier 2 and see if there's any questions related to Tier 1.
I'm not seeing any questions come in so far, Danielle.
Okay. So sorry, my cat. Good grief.
Oh,
this is the
those cats can be needy people.
My gosh. Yes, this is like the challenge of working from home. Okay. All right. Okay, so for Tier 2 is that we think about what's the data that helps us better understand our student needs, and in terms of providing small groups and short-term interventions, consultation and collaboration, referrals to resources. This is in your planning workshop. And I know I went through this before, but I'll give you a different example this time. And so, for example, if we're thinking about student behaviors, right, and wanting to use this as our data indicator, what might happen at your school is that you might have teachers who are saying, oh, well, this student's a behavior problem, you know, their admin saying, oh, this kid, this happened. But if you can create a plan for what data are you going to use that will indicate that a counselor intervention is needed, you could fill this out. For example, so is it a certain number of discipline referrals? Is the level of number of specific type of level infractions? I know sometimes at elementary they have like lower level infractions, higher infractions. So it could be, you know, 2 high level infractions or 4 low level. Is it a number of suspensions, percent of discipline? So the top 5% of students who have the highest discipline challenges. Being really clear about this is so helpful, so people know when to like when you'll be intervening, and then that helps reduce the amount of time that people are, you know, referring. Like if you know it's 2 or more, and instead of teachers coming in, they know, okay, well, after 2 referrals, the student will get this, you know, some support from the counselor. And then you can think, is it for every student? Are you going to focus on specific grade levels that are maybe having more challenges? And when will you be querying this data? We used to query it about once a month. And tried to put it on our calendar so that then our admin would give us, I mean, of course, bigger referrals we get more quickly, but so that the admin would give us those data reports. And so what you can see, this is an example from a high school where they thought through some other indicators. And so I'll give you a little bit of example here with like the credit deficiency for 10th grade. So they knew that this was their indicator. Students with under 50 credits, and they in the fall, or under 80 in the spring, based on the number of credits they would need at each period. They're 10th graders. This is when they would look at the data. And then here's what they would do. They'd have credit deficiency letters, and ID means indirect services, and then D is direct. So individual meetings with students and families was a direct service. The letters mailed home, and potentially a summer school letter mailed as well. And so this was is one example of how you might use this chart. Previously, there we go. And then think through the pieces of data that you, or I'm sorry, the pieces of intervention that you would put into it, okay? The last piece in thinking about the multi-tiered, multi-domain system of support is the tier 3, and knowing that when we're thinking about tier 3, it's really short term and not therapy. And I will say, even as you're thinking about this idea of being short term, and I will say this for any student or any age level, but I feel like especially, I know, I believe it was Leslie, you're at elementary, that at elementary, I think there's even more sometimes of a misunderstanding about the counselor role, and potentially that we do provide more longer term counseling. And so really what would happen for me as I would start to meet with students, if I could tell that they had a tier, like a need to have outside services, even in 1 or 2 sessions, I wouldn't wait to start connecting them to resources. I would immediately start to try to do the referral. And for a couple of reasons. 1, because we know it takes a little bit of time. 2, because I feel like as students build a relationship with you, sometimes then it's harder for them to be as excited about going to outside counseling. I had that happen a lot, I feel like, at middle and high school, but also because that's ultimately what they need. And so while yes, you can provide 6 to 8 weeks, that if you know they need more, trying to set that up right away. And so again, not having therapy in our role, but really instead thinking about ways that we can refer, and really instead this is kind of more short-term, and then also crisis response situations. So as you're thinking about a multi-tiered, multi-domain system of support, what we did last time was we took some time to consider our strengths and areas for growth. Since some of you have done this presentation or the part 1 before, we won't actually do the 3 minutes, but I do want you to just take 1 minute. Let me see if I can adjust this, and write in the chat either a strength you have or a goal you have for next year as you're thinking about implementing more of a model of MTMDSS. Okay, so I'll advance this. Here we go. You got a minute.
While you were presenting, I want to say Amanda shared that she loved the menu handout with family and parent services.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, it's super, super helpful. I think the more tools we have, the better as counselors. So areas of strength. There are also areas that are goals, and especially as you're thinking about, kind of redefining your role for next year. And Leslie, I love it, to implement more parent and family education. That's great. The nice thing I will say too, again, with the silver lining of us all have more virtual skills, is that being able to do some of them virtually, because we know that it can be difficult for families depending on the time that they work and such. So that can be also a nice benefit when we're thinking about some of that. Diana, anything else you're seeing?
We've got Cami, who has said, I would like to use more data to drive decisions and services. Amanda contributed quick, short assessment of needs 2 to 3 times a year to drive interventions. Goal is to spend more time on tier 1.
Perfect. Awesome. So those are great goals. And I will say all of those actually are connected to being a school counseling leader, because the more that we're using data, that we're sharing how students are different because of our work, and that, and also advocating for our families, all of that is really, really powerful. So I'm going to skip this slide and go on to this, because we didn't get as much time with the data, and I know I'm running short on time this time too, is that I want to share some examples of what this data looks like, and also just a framework to hopefully help you think through this data piece, right? So we have different types of data. You have the process, or ASCA now calls it participation data, which is really the who, what, where, when, how long you're doing things. And so a quick example is that I used to give a lesson for my students about why grades matter. It was for both 7th and 8th grade. I would do it. This is when we got 2 counselors, so I was able to do it. The 2 of us were able to do it earlier in the year, at the end of September. That was when it happened. It was in math classes, and it was about 43 minutes exactly, because that was our class period. We wanted students to believe that getting good grades was important. We wanted them to, know the requirements for grades in terms of participating in school activities like sports, and the 8th grade promotion requirements, and then to have the skill to actually log on and check their grades and missing assignments. We actually had them do that. And then what we monitored was students' grades, and to see, did that lesson help impact potentially increased and improved grades. And that's why this goes to the right when we think of classroom lessons for counselors. It goes the reverse way, because we're basically querying our data to think about what our student needs are for intentional intervention. So we would then look at our students' grades, and then we go backwards and think, is it an attitude, a knowledge, or a skill challenge that kids are having, right? Because if a kid is not performing because of, just being unmotivated, that's a really different intervention than a kid who is not performing because they just academically are not able to perform in the class, right? And so those are different types of interventions, and then that will help us think through what type of intervention do kids need. And so use this model to help us think through, again, the data we were using, and how this could ultimately support kids. So as we're thinking about sharing data, I put a bunch of different results in here that we'll go through in our last 10 minutes. Sometimes I call it speed dataing, where we think about, this is an example from an elementary school. When I was a grant project director, all of our elementary kiddos, we went into classes pretty regularly and did lessons using the Second Step Violence Prevention Program. And we wanted to see, well, did this positively impact the student behavior? And what we noticed that over the time was that there were more students who had outstanding and satisfactory grades. And you can see these increases, which were, I'm sure, connected to many things, but hopefully also connected to the fact that students were receiving those lessons. If you look at attendance, you can see this is an example presentation from some counselors who compared their attendance at each school, the before and after, and then you can see the overall increase of close to 3%. And I shared this slide with you earlier about how to use data in terms of student climate surveys. Some more work when we think about the secondary level in terms of graduation and dropout rates. This school, Pittsburgh High School, they looked at their graduation rates, and you can see they had a pretty big increase, 10 percentage points, which is 12% over time when you do when you calculate by a percent change. That and they even had higher rates than the state. They compared it to the district and the state. And you can see the dropout rates had severely declined too. And so sharing this, but also they shared what the school counselors were doing. The counselors were going to the classes, they were doing four-year plans and connecting them with families about this. And you can also see there was more students who were meeting requirements to attend the University of California or California State University system. This was an exciting increase for them as well. One thing that I did when I was explaining that we would query the D's and F's for our students, this is one of the things I think that became one of my favorites, was that we, what we did was, because we had a really high number of kids with D's and F's, this was kids who had either two or more F's or 3 or more D's and F's. And it turned out to be close to 50 kids per grade level. And so what we did is we did put them in an intervention, but we did kind of a shorter term one to begin with. We did a 2-part lunch workshop where we called the kids in, and we did them in small groups of about 20 kids. We showed them a video. We talked about a reminder about the class lesson, why grades are important. We reminded especially the 8th graders about the promotion criteria to participate in all the activities. And then we had them write a postcard, and you can see it says, "Dear family, I'm writing you because I attended a lunch workshop with my school counselor to check my grades and work on improving. My goal this trimester is," and then they filled that in. We worked with them to create a goal, some actions I can help that were connected to their goal. You can help me by, and then they signed it. And we basically just printed these on cardstock and then sent them home to families so that they knew we were working with their child. We then, during that workshop, they were able to check their grades online and write down missing assignments. And we also talked to them about what I used to call the evil power of a 0, where I would actually on a whiteboard go through with them, because I think kids don't always understand how when they have just 1 or 2 missing assignments, how much that brings their grade down. So we would whiteboard that, and I would show them how that is. And even if you don't get your full credit, because I think sometimes kids were like, I don't want to turn this in, I'm not going to get full credit. I would show them how much that could help boost their grade back up. And so just from this 2-part workshop, what we found is we had a really significant reduction in the amount of kids that had multiple D's and F's at the next reporting period. And so then what we did was, with these kids, the 21 and the 28, then we did a more intensive intervention, like a 6 to 8 week group. What was really nice about it is that this, we didn't have to do all the kids in that 6 to 8 week group. That might not have been feasible for our time, but this helped us then think through, okay, well, now we can do some groups with these students. And so these 3 slides are exact slides that I shared with my school staff, and probably spent less than 5 minutes telling them what I was doing. And again, being a leader as a school counselor in a multi-tiered, multi-domain system of support is sharing what you're doing. And we would basically have, we worked with our administration to get about 5 minutes per staff meeting to just share what was going on. Sometimes it was including data like this. Other times we'd be sharing updates like college and career days coming up. Here's some information for you teachers, but really it helped teachers know what we were doing, and also seeing that we're using data. And this is another example of what we did to continually share data, because like I said, at the middle school, we advocated for 2 counselors, and we then didn't want to just stop. What we wanted to do was show how kids were different because of having 2 counselors. And so this was our 8th grade. So in order for kids to participate in the 8th grade promotion ceremony, they had to have less than 5 Fs over the course of 3 trimesters, which yes, I know is a lot, but that's just the way it was. But the year that I was the solo counselor, there was 37 kids. Every year after that, there were less than 10 students that had, that weren't able to participate in promotion. And so what you can see is these were all the things we did. And so we explained here, we know that teachers are a huge part of this. And we had lunch workshops, we had small groups, we had summer workshops, we met with families and tutoring, yada, yada. And so this was really helpful as we were trying to explain all the things we were doing to support our kids. Diane, I see you're unmuted. I don't know if you had a question or a comment.
I just accidentally did that. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure. No, you're all good. So the last few minutes, here's your ticket out the door. Is that I know we started to think about this a little bit and you started to pause, but was to think, if you haven't yet, I know some of you did, like Leslie and a few other people had started to think about some goals, but I also wanted to see if people have questions in the last couple minutes or as they're thinking through their programs, anything that might be helpful to them when you're thinking about being a leader and sharing data and implementing a multi-tiered, multi-domain system of support as a school counselor. I'll put the objectives back up here too, just to make sure we feel good about this. So any questions, any thoughts?
I didn't see her before.
Well, as we're finishing up, I will just say I love sharing about school counseling. Hopefully that is clear from the energy and just think that you all have such an awesome opportunity this year, like I said, as you're thinking about redesigning your programs, because it's kind of like a new year in a way, and hopefully COVID will stay at bay and we'll be able to be in a good situation. And I'm happy to help. If there's things that come up that you have questions about, feel free to email me or contact me. And thank you so much.
Danielle, thank you so much for being with us today. Amanda did share great information, examples, and resources. Thank you.
Thanks,
so we appreciate your time, and you can feel the passion that you have for this topic.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, if anyone has anything, or I wish you all the best of luck as you're thinking about this new school year, a fresh start to redesign your counseling programs and best support kids. And I know you all are doing an amazing work. So yeah, thank you.
Great. Participants, if you would do the survey that's linked in the session description, and then that'll also trigger for your PGP points. And I think that we have come to the end of our time together. So thanks so much for joining us. Thank you, Danielle, for your time.
Thank you.
And hopefully that the virtually different conference for Keep Indiana Learning has been a great experience for you.
Yeah, thanks everybody.